they're providing a vial formulation. It's something that they've talked about, for a while now on their calls. Now, the reason why these are easier to produce is, the fill and finish capacity. So the capacity needed to actually put the drug in the pens, and the capacity needed to manufacture the pens of the subcutaneous injection. So overall, I think the move is positive for Lilly. Clearly, broadens access or patients' access to Zepbound, and also from compounding pharmacy standpoint, the fact that it improves supply means it could possibly combat competition from companies such as Hims and Hers.
Yeah, Lilly not so subtly saying that they want to aim to protect patients from, quote, counterfeit, fake, unsafe, or untested knockoffs. So how does that impact kind of the business and demand if we're seeing a cheaper version being sold and maybe trying to court some of those Hims and Hers GLP-1 users? How does that impact kind of the total addressable market and expectations for sales of Zepbound?
Well, I think if there's a branded vial formulation out there, and there's obviously guarantees around kind of purity, et cetera, I think that's going to be the preferred choice. The fact that you're introducing these vials into the market would suggest that some of that supply burden and supply shortage, which is needed for a compounding pharmacy to produce a drug that is on patent, some of that will be alleviated there. So that's kind of why we think it's positive for Lilly. As to whether companies like Hims and Hers will continue producing their versions of the GLP-1s, I mean, that remains to be seen. But I imagine if they do, Lilly will probably challenge it.
When people then do their own shots, like administer it, like is there a risk in that? Like what kind of uptake are we expecting from that? Because I would be scared to do it, but maybe that's just me.
I mean, I think judging by what we saw for uptake of these compounded drugs, there's clearly a appetite for injectable therapy injections. Now we look to the diabetes market. Some of the insulins used to be injections. So I mean, I think it's not. I mean, there's clearly kind of an increased kind of dosing burden associated with these injections. So they're probably not going to be suitable for all, but I think there is going to be an appetite for it.
What does this mean for the competitive landscape? So you have Lilly, you have Novo. To your point, you have Hims and Hers. Like, is this going to create a pricing war, or am I reading too much into that?
No, I mean, when we look at the the headline said 50%, discount. But we need to remember that, on a net price basis, so, after taking account all the rebates and discounts, the pricing is probably, fairly similar to the current net prices that we're seeing now. At the moment, it's an underpenetrated market. There's massive demand out there. There's tight supply. So I don't think it's going to change too much in terms of the dynamics between Novo and Lilly. I think prescribing decisions are less about kind of the profiles of the drug at the moment and more about what is insured, what can people get their hands on.
Yeah.
So near term, I don't see that changing. From a Lilly perspective, as they ramp up supply over the midterm of their their pens. You could potentially see, patients switching from the injectable onto the pen as and when that supply comes on board.